For the royals, tradition is everything.
Tradition is the raison d'etre of the royal family, the human embodiment of Britishness.
Spectacular.
The thundering of the hooves and the banging of the drums. I defy anyone not to get thrilled by that.
Sacred.
It's almost as though the king is invested with superpowers.
And very British.
Victoria's funeral was a reminder that we were still the dog's whatnots at this game.
Now we reveal the secrets of those traditions, from banquets to christenings to coronations.
You may think it's pantomime, but no. The uniforms were handed down from servant to servant.
And how some traditions can go wrong.
With Elizabeth I, her body actually exploded in its coffin.
It's a rich royal heritage that's been forged through duty to the nation.
The British monarchy is always at the service of the British state.
No matter what the task.
The duty of the royals is to go and open every damn thing that's around, from a supermarket to sewage works.
The Queen loved it. Prince Philip hated it.
As for over 1,000 years, the royals have shaped the history and the traditions we know today.
They're sending out a message. This is an ancient institution and it's here to stay.
These are the secrets of royal traditions, then and now. This time, the touching traditions on display at the Queen's funeral.
Everything in her life was planned to the finest detail, including her funeral.
The secret messages royals have been sending us for centuries.
She was said to have owned 6,000 dresses. Each one had a very deliberate meaning.
And the great royal tradition that saw Britannia rule the waves.
What better way to manifest the power of the British state than to break a bottle of wine against the hulk of a ship?
On the 8th of September, 2022, after 70 years on the throne, Queen Elizabeth II died. What followed was a royal tradition the likes of which few of us have ever seen. A funeral like no other. Over 10 extraordinary days, the world watched as 4 royal palaces, 3 churches, horses, hearses, carriages, planes, and over 6,000 military personnel played their part in a finely choreographed state funeral that was decades in the planning.
Everything in her life was planned to the finest detail, including her funeral.
In terms of elaborateness, there had been no funeral in the whole of British history like the funeral of Elizabeth II.
The rituals enacted were unseen in nearly a century, but they weren't without precedent, because as an official state funeral, there was a strict set of traditions to be followed. Rules that were shaped over 1,000 years of history.
There are elements which you might have seen in, say, Nelson's funeral, the Duke of Wellington's funeral, Churchill's funeral.
Like Winston Churchill nearly 60 years earlier, according to tradition, the late Queen's coffin was taken to Westminster Hall, the oldest building in the Houses of Parliament.
This amazing space is the grandest medieval hall in the world. It was set out at the end of the 11th century by William II, the son of William the Conqueror. And what he created was a hall 240 feet long, 67 feet wide. By far the biggest hall in England, almost certainly the largest in Europe. It was perfect for state ceremonial, occasion, feasts, you name it. There was nothing that could match it.
This rich history makes Westminster Hall the perfect place to celebrate the most public of royal funeral traditions, the lying in state.
Lying in state is an extraordinary ritual, really. It's an opportunity to take part in a moment of history.
The inspiration of it dates back centuries, when a monarch would effectively lie in state, though it wasn't called that. Their body would often be at Westminster, and there would be a sort of candlelit vigil around it by members of their household. It was a much more private affair, though, not at all like the crowds that we saw for the lying in state of Queen Elizabeth II.
The first British monarch to lie in state publicly was Edward VII in 1910. This tradition has continued through 6 state funerals, until that of the late Queen, when 250,000 people queued to pay their respects.
The queues down the embankment, waiting to just say goodbye to our Queen. I think that's very moving.
Mourners waited up to 25 hours in a 10-mile-long queue, because for many, the Queen was more than a monarch.
I think it's a moment for the public to reflect on what this woman meant to them. This woman who, for all of their lifetime, was there in the background, the backbone in the fabric of our nation, really. And suddenly they felt they wanted to go there and say, well, thank you and goodbye.
After 4 days lying in state, a gun carriage carried the Queen's coffin to Westminster Abbey, continuing a tradition established during Queen Victoria's funeral. With ranks of marching soldiers, gun salutes, and that iconic gun carriage, it was a powerful statement of Britain's military might.
Victoria's funeral was a reminder that in the high noon of empire, we were still the dog's whatnots at this game. And while today we no longer have the empire, what we retain is, if you like, the flummery, the pomp, the pageantry.
The traditions are there for a reason. It's not just the pomp and the pageantry for the sake of it. They're sending out a message. This is an ancient institution and it's here to stay.
Queen Elizabeth's funeral was the greatest display of pageantry and tradition seen in our lifetime. But there are many royal traditions we see day to day, such as the deceptively simple act of dressing to send a message.
Dressing to convey meaning has gone back for centuries. And one of the best examples was Queen Elizabeth I. She was said to have owned 6,000 dresses. Each one had a very deliberate meaning.
Diana knew how to use imagery to send a message, and people got that message loud and clear.
In 2021, the then Duchess of Cambridge continued the long royal tradition of power dressing when she attended a Bond film premiere, swathed in gold sequins.
The effect was delicious, winsome. Even better, the designer was British, Jenny Packham, and the timing was brilliant. Why? Because this was the great post-pandemic fanfare. This was a display to the nation that normalcy had returned, that we once more could go out and grace our respective red carpets, even if it just meant going down to your local cinema.
Some thought the dazzling dress might also contain another coded message.
Some would say, if they were looking to be, dare I say, a little bit naughty, this was also Kate establishing herself in the face of the Sussex onslaught.
Commentators speculated that the dress was a very public power move, designed to tell Harry and Meghan that as the future king and queen, William and Kate were the one and only golden couple.
And just by putting on a frock, Kate reminded the whole wide world of that.
Coming up, the great royal tradition of unveiling plaques.
Prince Philip hated it. The Queen loved it, as long as the cord worked. And the curtains went back swiftly.
Launching ships.
Then she said, come on now, Captain. Splice the main brace and had a lovely drink.
And dressing with intent.
The mantle is decorated with ears and eyes, literally body parts.
Some royal traditions are rarely seen. But there's one that we witness week in, week out. The great royal tradition of opening things.
The duty of the royals is to go and open every damn thing that's around, you know, from a supermarket to sewage works to huge buildings to parliaments.
I have now much pleasure in declaring this block of flats open.
There's a very long tradition of royals opening state buildings, public buildings, giving their name to things. This is another very useful mechanism for a monarch to get their name and sometimes their image out there. So by putting their name to something, it helps to remind people that they're there.
It's a tradition that might get a little tedious at times.
Prince Philip hated it. The Queen loved it. As long as the cord worked and the curtains went back swiftly.
But there's one tradition that generations of royals seem to relish.
What better way, what cheaper, easier way to manifest the power, the regal majesty of the British state than to break a bottle of wine against the hulk of a ship?
God bless her and all who sail in her. Oh, it must be such fun to launch a ship. The Queen loved that.
Over 7 decades, the Queen sent 21 bottles smashing against bows, launching more ships than anyone else in the nation's history. The tradition might seem like it belongs to the age of colossal cruise ships and aircraft carriers, but in fact, it's as old as shipbuilding itself.
The tradition goes back to ancient Greece of blessing a ship, almost christening a ship, so traditionally throwing water over it and, you know, sending it to sea with their blessing. Now, water then turned into wine and champagne.
Over the centuries, dousing the deck with wine was swapped for the much more satisfying smash of a bottle on the bow.
I remember the late Queen Mother. She went back to the Ark Royal, the aircraft carrier, and she was 101 at the time. She walked along, leaning a little bit one way. Everyone was, oh, she's going to be all right, you know. But she made it to the assembly of all the sailors, and she made a little speech. And then she said, well, come on now, Captain, splice the main brace, and had a lovely drink, because she would like to have a little drink. And you could see she absolutely loved every moment of that occasion.
From Henry VIII and Elizabeth I to the Princess of Wales, royals have traditionally used dress to make statements. And none more so than Diana during her acrimonious separation from Prince Charles. By the summer of 1994, Diana and Charles were heading for divorce. Theirs was a bitter breakup, played out across the front pages.
The War of the Wales was the entire drama that unfolded between Charles and Diana. The ill-fated marriage, the affairs, the infidelity, the separation, the divorce. It was also a media war.
There's a lot of sniping between both of them, and it got more and more intense, and it was largely conducted through their friends, anonymous briefings to the newspapers mainly, but also to other media figures. Both sides started slinging all sorts of muck and allegations about the other to try and maintain some kind of advantage in the public's mind's eye. The newspapers presented Charles as a cold husband, an indifferent father. It painted him very much as the villain of the piece and Diana as the victim.
It seemed Diana was winning the battle for public sympathy. To tell his side of the story, Charles filmed an explosive interview, which was due to be broadcast on the 29th of June.
There was a huge amount of press attention in the days and weeks leading up to it, and it's all built up to a climax. And of course, what everyone wanted to know was, what would Diana do? Where would she be? Would she be watching it? How would she respond to it?
Faced with an awkward or embarrassing situation, the usual royal protocol was to say nothing and stay out of the spotlight. But Diana had other ideas.
The same night that Prince Charles's documentary aired, Princess Diana was not staying at home, crying into her pajamas. She was getting dressed up for a fabulous party at the Serpentine Gallery.
That evening, at her Kensington home, Princess Diana decided to ignore royal protocol and step into the spotlight.
She looked through her wardrobe and her eyes alit on this outfit she'd never worn before. She thought it was too daring for her to wear.
That night was the night she decided she could be as daring as she wanted.
Even if that meant defying royal etiquette.
Now, traditionally, royals don't wear black unless they're going to a funeral. But Diana, after her separation, had completely ripped up the royal style book.
Meanwhile, royal photographer Anwar Hussain received a vital tip-off.
There was rumors going on that something very big is going to happen this evening and people should come. Diana used to send messages through somebody without us knowing that it was her who was leaking this information. She told reporters, I'm going to do something very big. It's going to take on the whole royal family.
Just before Charles's interview hit the screens, Princess Diana arrived at the Serpentine Gallery for the event.
She made sure they parked the car quite far away. Once the door opened, she was full of confidence. Bring it on, I'll take it on. That was her attitude. You can see from the way she walked and how glamorous she looked. I've never seen her like that. She was there to kill.
The little black dress made a big statement.
It was off the shoulder, it revealed cleavage, it was cinched very tightly at the waist. It was a fantastic dress that screamed, I'm an independent woman. It also said to Charles, if you like, look at what you're missing. And it very quickly, within about a day, became known as the revenge dress.
It was revenge against the public, the media, against all the negative portrayals of her as being loopy or unhinged or vulnerable or a victim. It was the outfit that said, I'm no one's victim, I'm my own woman.
And the revenge dress had the desired effect.
I think it's fair to say that she weaponized her fashion choices that night because it achieved everything that she could have possibly have wanted. She looked $1 million. She was on the front page of every paper. And I think that helped enormously, in her view, in sort of counterbalancing what Charles was up to. It showed that Diana was not going to hide away and that she was prepared to confront whatever her husband might throw in her face, and she was going to come out a stronger woman for it.
Princess Diana looked like she was the future of womankind and the monarchy and culture in the mid-90s.
With the revenge dress, Diana continued the long royal tradition of using clothes to send a message. A tradition pioneered by Elizabeth I.
If you look at that picture, the mantle that she's wearing, this exquisite mantle, is decorated with ears and eyes, literally body parts, bits of anatomy. You think, what is going on in that picture? Look closely at it. And of course, that's the all-seeing queen. She is the omnipresent, omnipotent sovereign. She sees you. She is the all-seeing eye.
This extraordinary dress is preserved for posterity in what's known as the rainbow portrait. It's a stunning example of the great royal tradition of using portraits to send a message to the world. A tradition Elizabeth learned from the greatest master of the art, her own father.
Henry VIII took royal portraiture to a whole other level. This was royal PR at its finest.
He's got this great barrel chest, the codpiece, the legs apart, the penetrating stare, the hands on the hip, the thumping great dagger. He's not a man to be messed with. That is what that portrait's saying. It's this kind of extraordinary exemplar of power.
For Henry, as for other monarchs, projecting an image of power was more than simply a matter of pride.
It was dangerous for a monarch to show any signs of frailty, because then the vultures would start to circle. His enemies, his rivals from overseas, if they think the King of England isn't long for this world, they might start to plan invasion.
For centuries, royals have used portraiture to send a message to their rivals and their subjects. Every monarch has embraced this tradition, from Henry VIII and Charles II to Queen Elizabeth II, who was painted over 1,000 times during her reign. Of these portraits, perhaps the most striking and controversial was painted by artist Lucian Freud.
Lucian Freud was one of the most successful popular figurative artists of the 20th century. He was particularly well known for his really searingly truthful images of people. For nudes, which are very uncompromising, quite gritty, not particularly pretty.
So eyebrows were raised when the Queen agreed to be his subject.
It's quite a brave decision of the Queen.
Freud offered to paint the Queen for free. And after years of secret negotiations, the Queen accepted.
He kept insisting that the Queen would need to come to his studio, and he was asking for at least 72 sittings. The Queen, of course, is a phenomenally busy woman. She doesn't normally give more than a handful of sittings to any one portrait painter.
Eventually, they compromised. Freud would come to the Queen, painting her in 20 sessions, far fewer than the original 72 sittings requested.
When he realised he would have much less time, he just immediately shrunk the size of the canvas. It's a really small, almost postcard-sized painting of the Queen. You'd see this cropped version of the Queen's head and shoulders with just that edge of the crown coming over her head. She could almost be one of us.
When it was revealed to the public in December 2001, this was the most personal and least traditional of the Queen's official portraits. And not surprisingly, it caused quite a stir.
You had some newspapers saying it was deep and exploratory, and then you had others saying it was an absolute travesty, and how could this thing be let out in public?
He's not exactly a flattering portrait painter.
What the Queen thought, I don't know.
But what we do know is that for many, this portrait will go down as one of the least flattering ever created. Coming up, the tools of royal tradition, used to project the monarchy's power, from priceless diamonds.
There's this incredible 3,106 carat ruff, sort of like a small ostrich egg.
To golden balls.
No one else, other than a king or a queen, can turn up at a party with a sceptre and a great ball of gold.
At the heart of the grandest royal ceremonies, from coronations to funerals, are the crown jewels. These spectacular treasures, steeped in centuries of tradition, are the royals' tools of the trade. And none is more traditional than the orb and sceptre.
Nothing says royalty quite like an orb and sceptre. No one else, other than a king or a queen, can turn up at a party with a sceptre and a great ball of gold.
The orb and sceptre are the ultimate power tools, rooted in symbolism that stretches back millennia.
The orb itself is the symbol of the cosmos, the whole wide world. And then the three sections you can see into which the orb is divided is the way in which we perceived the then world, which was Europe, Asia, and Africa. And of course, the cross on the top, Christendom. Christendom overseeing the world.
The orb's origins date back long before the British royal family to the most powerful imperial rulers of all time, the Romans. The sceptre is even more ancient. For that, we have to thank the pharaohs.
It doesn't matter whether it's an old man's staff, a peasant's crook, the idea of the sovereign rod, the stick of temporal power. That is what the sceptre is. It is about authority.
As a statement of power, Britain's orb and sceptre aren't exactly subtle. When King Charles II ordered them for his coronation in 1661, he went all in.
The sceptre is nearly a metre-long golden rod, and it is encrusted with jewels. There are 333 diamonds, 31 rubies, there are 15 emeralds, 6 spinels, and 1 large composite amethyst.
At the top of the sceptre is the great star of Africa, the Cullinan I diamond. It is absolutely stunning, and it is 530.2 carats in size.
That's over 100 grams of pure diamond. And though it might look like a sacred and unchangeable object, it's not. The Cullinan diamond at its head was only added in 1910, nearly 250 years after the sceptre's creation.
The royal family have a different approach to these sacred objects than the rest of us. They are very happy to edit and change them.
To the royal family, this is the chance for each monarch with these objects to put their own stamp on it, their own twist.
King Edward VII knew just the thing. Recently discovered in the British imperial colony of South Africa, the largest diamond ever discovered, the Cullinan diamond.
It was this incredible 3,106 carat rough, sort of like a small ostrich egg. It was an enormous piece of diamond.
Unsurprisingly, the diamond attracted a lot of attention when it was sent over to London.
It was under great pomp and circumstance. It was sort of publicly known that this diamond was going to be put on a paddle steamer with detectives and guards. But the reality was, it was actually put through the postal service so that it remained utterly secure and unknown.
After the diamond was popped in the post, the royal family was left with a problem. A diamond that big is actually not very practical.
The stone was then sent to the Netherlands to be cut down. It was made into 9 large stones and 97 smaller stones.
The king had the larger stone, Cullinan I, ingeniously added to his sceptre.
The sceptre has a secret element to it, which is that the top frame is hinged so that that massive diamond, Cullinan I, can be taken out and used in other settings. I mean, what an expression of wealth and power.
Today, the magnificent orb and sceptre sit proudly on display in the Tower of London. But we're very lucky to still have them. In 1671, Charles II was almost responsible for losing these priceless treasures.
He decided to put them on public display in the Tower of London, where people could pay a fee to look at them. One person wanted to do more than look.
A man called Thomas Blood and a bunch of accomplices tried to steal the crown jewels from the Tower of London by sticking them down their trousers. Thankfully, he didn't get away, and thankfully, there is more security in the Tower of London today.
The crown jewels only leave the tower for state occasions, like the late Queen's funeral. Royal funerals are planned with meticulous precision, according to centuries of finely honed tradition. But sometimes events happen that are so unexpected, so shocking, there's no tradition to follow.
I think of Diana's funeral as something which should never have happened. We were flying by the seat of our pants, really, because there was no plan for a Princess of Wales dying at such a young age. So the rule book was thrown out and a new one was written.
It was decided that Diana would have a traditional royal funeral. But in a break with tradition, the Spencer family would then bury the princess privately.
The day of the public funeral was something the world had never seen before and probably will never see again.
Over 1 million people crowded central London and lined the route. Diana's driver, Colin Tebbett, was one of the very few people to attend both Diana's public and private funerals.
We were very honoured by Lord Spencer to invite the staff to the funeral. We were in the choir stall. We couldn't have got any closer. We sat there right at the front with the royal family.
But unlike other royals, Diana wouldn't be buried in the Abbey or in the royal family's chapel at Windsor Castle. Instead, the princess was taken for a very private burial at her family estate at Althrop, Northamptonshire.
Every pavement filled to overflowing. A last chance to say goodbye. More flowers, more people.
As the gates closed behind her hearse, the TV coverage came to an end. And so did royal traditions. Instead of being buried in a royal chapel, Diana would be laid to rest on a private island within the Althrop estate.
Not a soul got anywhere near that island. Whoever did the arranging to seal off, and there are rolling fields everywhere. You know, there must have been a tremendous thing. I've never known how they did it, but nobody got near us. Not a soul, not a photograph, not a soul. The army had put a bridge up across to the island, and the army walked across the bridge, carrying Her Royal Highness on their shoulders and lowered into where she'd been buried. The family then did what everybody does at a funeral, a family funeral, and went to the edge. I stood back with Paul. And then there were prayers said to be included with the household, two of us, with the very last bit of that burial of the boss being lowered. And you know, it's never really, I've never really grasped it really. It's always been did it really happen to me? But immensely emotional, immensely emotional. Very difficult to take in.
Two funerals, two very different styles. One incredibly public, with the general public massively involved, eyes of the world on Westminster Abbey, and the long funeral procession on the gun carriage. Very different funeral at Althorpe, quite short, with effectively her coffin being interred, buried in the ground.
The private island was a fitting final resting place for a woman who had lived her life in the public gaze.
We had to give the princess dignity and privacy in death to protect her, to keep her away from prying eyes, to keep her safe.
Coming up, the traditional royal treasure with a story straight out of a spy thriller.
Hidden in a secret alcove in her palace, the tiara was under the noses of the Bolshevik government for many years.
The dinner party surprise nobody asked for.
So he takes the fourth vertebra of Charles I's neck, puts it in his pocket and saves it, and he passes it round at dinner parties.
And the royal burial tradition that ended with a bang.
She hears the body, the corpse of the late Queen, explode inside her coffin.
Tradition runs through every aspect of royal life.
Tradition is very important for the royal family. It's what everything is based on. 1,000 years royal history and tradition is what keeps the royal family in business.
These traditions can be wonderful, weird, and occasionally revolting.
Looking back over the centuries, it could be a challenge if a monarch died a long way from London, where they were traditionally buried either at Westminster Abbey or slightly later at Windsor. And so traditionally there was quite a gap between death and burial.
Add in the time needed to organise a grand funeral fit for a monarch, and days soon turned to weeks.
With Elizabeth I, for example, it was well over a month before she was laid to rest at Westminster.
In an age before refrigeration, this tradition didn't bode well.
The funeral of Henry VIII in 1547 was overshadowed by the putrefaction of his corpse. And there were stories that the coffin began to leak in the chapel overnight, and it was some of his bodily fluids leaking out the side of the coffin. Apparently, a local dog came in and licked it up.
It seems his daughter Elizabeth's burial was similarly stomach-churning.
There's this wonderful account, and it's quite rare to have an account written by a woman at that time. She hears the body, the corpse of the late Queen, explode inside her coffin.
But at least Elizabeth was buried in more or less one piece. After losing his head to the executioner's axe in 1649, King Charles I was buried in St. George's Chapel, Windsor. But did he take his decapitated head to his grave?
Was Charles I's head attached or not? Had it been sewn back on? And this question became the equivalent of that crossword clue you just can't solve.
By 1813, the intrigue had become too great for the then Prince Regent to resist.
If you thought that the only Tomb Raider out there was Lara Croft, well, there's another one, and that was the Prince Regent, future King George IV. So, the Prince Regent asks the royal physician, Henry Halford, to go down into the royal vault in St. George's Chapel, Windsor, and look at the grave of Charles I. Henry Halford opens the coffin and finds the body of Charles I wrapped in cloth and smeared with some greasy, unctuous matter. He takes the cloth off the body and says that actually the head still remains. It is blackened and the nose has lost its cartilage. But he says this is definitely Charles I because it looks just like Charles I in the bust. And then he gets out the head and he holds it up, and he can tell, he says, that it's been sawn off by a big blow. And that solves the question for the Prince Regent. Charles I's head was buried with him. And you'd think, now, poor Charles I can be put back to bed and really rest in peace at Windsor Castle at St. George's Chapel for the rest of the days. But no, Henry Halford has found this all rather thrilling and decides to take a souvenir for himself. So he takes the fourth vertebra of Charles I's neck, puts it in his pocket and saves it, and he passes it round at dinner parties. So thanks to the Prince Regent's crazy obsession with whether or not Charles I's head was on or off, St. George's Chapel at Windsor Castle becomes the scene of a royal grave robbery.
Tradition dictates that when the monarch's body is ready for burial, the crown jewels, the orb and sceptre, are placed on their coffin. But there's another set of royal jewels that are prohibited at a funeral. The royal family's collection of over 50 spectacular tiaras that are traditionally reserved for times of celebration.
Every little girl wants to put on her princess dress with a tiara. Not a crown. A crown's a bit OTT, but a tiara.
Each enchanting headpiece comes with a strict set of rules.
There's a bit of tradition that goes around tiaras. They except at weddings, they're not meant to be worn before 5 p.m. in the evening. Don't put your tiara on at tea time. That's not done.
Handing tiaras down through the generations is another family tradition.
There are a number of tiaras in the royal collection, and each royal bride is given a loan of a number of tiaras for their lifetime.
The Princess of Wales has 4 tiaras that she's loaned because these belong to the sovereign. And of those 4, my favourite is the Lotus Flower Tiara. It is, I think, a 1920s icon.
But perhaps the most iconic of all the royal tiaras is this, the spectacular Vladimir tiara.
It's a really elegant, timeless piece filled with diamonds. There are 15 circles connected by a wavy band that intersects them, and 15 enormous teardrop pearls hang from the loops, each of which is worth thousands of pounds.
But the tiara's story makes it priceless. Behind its shimmering exterior lies an untold tale of glamour, intrigue, and daring adventure.
The story of how the tiara got into the hands of the British royals is something a bit like a spy mystery.
The story began in Russia in 1874. The tiara was made by the imperial jewelers to the Russian royal family for Maria Pavlovna, the wife of Grand Duke Vladimir, the Tsar's brother. But after the revolution of 1917, communist Russia was no longer safe for aristocrats as wealthy and prominent as Maria Pavlovna.
When the Russian royal family came tumbling down, she hid her precious jewels in a secret compartment within her home, escaping with just her day jewels.
The Grand Duchess was the last Romanov to escape Russia, dying in France in 1920. Her family had lost everything, except for the jewels.
Hidden in a secret alcove in her palace, the tiara was under the noses of the Bolshevik government for many years.
Her son, Grand Duke Boris, persuades an art dealer friend of his to smuggle themselves into the country and get the jewels out. And then miraculously transports them 1,300 miles back across Europe, hidden in a leather Gladstone bag, all the way back to London.
Queen Mary bought the tiara for £28,000. Now, that's about the equivalent of £1.25 million today, a huge amount.
But despite the tiara's cost and pedigree, the royal family were keen to add their own personal touch.
It can also be worn with a stunning set of green emeralds. These were commissioned by Queen Mary, Queen Elizabeth's grandmother, and they were a set of cabochon drops that came from her own family's cache of gems.
The tiaras might be steeped in history, but like virtually every royal treasure and tradition, the family aren't afraid to adapt them to meet their modern needs. From tiaras to sceptres, fashion to funerals, the British monarchy has mastered the art of respecting ancient traditions whilst reinventing them for the modern world.
By adapting occasionally, progressing very slowly, but always having several feet, I would say, firmly in the past, they are holding us firm and reminding us where we've come from, who we are, and where we're going.
Next time, the diplomatic dilemmas of a traditional royal state visit.
The family are very aware that they are being used as a propaganda machine.
The sometimes dangerous relations between the palace and the press.
Diana, Princess of Wales, is chased to her death by people in search of a photograph of her.
And how the changing royal traditions of beauty put Elizabeth I in peril.
It could make your gums recede and your breath stink. You're basically giving yourself lead poisoning.
For the royals, tradition is everything.
Tradition is the raison d'etre of the royal family, the human embodiment of Britishness.
Spectacular.
The thundering of the hooves and the banging of the drums. I defy anyone not to get thrilled by that.
Sacred.
It's almost as though the king is invested with superpowers.
And very British.
Victoria's funeral was a reminder that we were still the dog's whatnots at this game.
Now we reveal the secrets of those traditions, from banquets to christenings to coronations.
You may think it's pantomime, but no, the uniforms were handed down from servant to servant.
And how some traditions can go wrong.
With Elizabeth I, her body actually exploded in its coffin.
It's a rich royal heritage that's been forged through duty to the nation.
The British monarchy is always at the service of the British state.
No matter what the task.
The duty of the royals is to go and open every damn thing that's around, from a supermarket to sewage works.
The Queen loved it. Prince Philip hated it.
As for over 1,000 years, the royals have shaped the history and the traditions we know today.
They're sending out a message. This is an ancient institution and it's here to stay.
These are the secrets of royal traditions, then and now. This time, the jewel in the crown of royal traditions, the state visit.
This is the best invitation you could ever have.
What happens when world leaders flout centuries of tradition?
Jimmy Carter meeting the late Queen Mother and kissing her on the lips, and she was really shocked.
And how an ancient tradition was the perfect form of royal PR.
It weaponizes the royal family.
No other occasion puts royal tradition front and centre, quite like a state visit from a foreign leader. All the spectacle and ceremony of royalty is on full display, and the whole world is watching.
A state visit entails a lot of pomp and pageantry. On the first day of the state visit, there's usually the state banquet. Everyone's dressed to the nines in all their sashes and medals, and there's a toast to the incoming president. There's a lot of flattery goes on, which is all intended to improve our relations with that country.
It's an event where royal tradition comes out in force. And for visiting leaders, the prestige of the occasion is irresistible.
To be photographed with the British royal family, the King and Queen, and with Kate and William, this is a photo opportunity which is rolled in glitter. It's the best invitation you could ever have.
And it's not just an elaborate state dinner and a photo op. Over the course of 3 days, foreign leaders are immersed in extravagant royal tradition. From a ceremonial welcome on Horse Guards Parade, to a carriage procession escorted by mounted soldiers, accompanied by gun salutes, and meetings with the Prime Minister, making a royal state visit a cornerstone of our international relations.
To be received by the British head of state at Buckingham Palace, this is a great signifier of your international status, and it's terrific business for Britain.
The tradition of the royal state visit can be traced back to 1814, when the Allied sovereigns visited the Prince Regent to celebrate the defeat of Napoleon Bonaparte. Dignitaries from Russia, Prussia, and Austria were greeted by guards of honor, ceremonial parades, and elaborate banquets. Traditions that continue to this day. Except these days, the royals are not in charge of the guest list.
It is not the palace who dictate who is coming, it is the government of the day who have an agenda.
And that means that sometimes when the government invites foreign dignitaries into their home, the royals have to grin and bear it.
The family are very aware that they are being used as a propaganda machine, really, for Britain and for another country.
Her Majesty the Queen...
Perhaps the most unpopular visitor was Romanian dictator Nicolae Ceausescu, who was welcomed to the palace for a state visit in 1978.
Elena Ceausescu.
Now, that was hugely controversial, and the Queen was very nonplussed about the idea of him quartering in her palace for 3 days and nights. And for those who need reminded, he was the most heinous communist dictator of all the communist dictators at that time.
He actually slept in the rooms underneath the Queen. Apparently, they slept with guns underneath their pillows. Every meeting was conducted in the garden, because he feared the rooms were bugged.
The Queen actually, when they were in the gardens at Buckingham Palace and she saw them, she hid behind a bush. So unpleasant did she find them.
But whoever the guest, the British monarchy is not afraid to use glamour as a secret weapon.
For example, when Xi Jinping, the president of China, was hosted, there was a state dinner, and that was chosen to be the Duchess of Cambridge's first state banquet. The timing behind that decision was, I think, second to none. The Chinese state-run newspapers, they all wrote that she wore Chinese red. That's how they received it on the other side of the world. They were flattered. Big China, little Britain, but China, you are lucky, because you are sitting next to, yes, the Queen on the one hand, but also, look, first time outing for the most glamorous player in the royal family. lucky, lucky Mr. Chinese president.
The royals' clever seating plan was a masterclass in international diplomacy. This 3-day visit alone generated more than £30 billion worth of trade, many times more than the cost of staging a traditional royal state visit.
There are all sorts of situations in which we put our monarch for the sake of Britain's place in the world.
The royal women at the centre of these official ceremonies are part of a tradition of projecting a perfect regal image to the world. But it's an image that takes a lot of time and effort. And the late Queen was careful to maintain her image at all times. In 1953, she even had a special shade of lipstick created for her by Clarins to complement her coronation robes. And in her later life was known to be a dab hand at applying her lippy.
She did like her makeup, and I've watched her quietly and secretly put on her lipstick. She doesn't need a mirror. So she cared a lot about her appearance.
The original pioneer of this tradition of a picture-perfect appearance was Elizabeth I, who went to extraordinary lengths to create her striking look.
Queen Elizabeth I was actually about 55 years old when she sat for the portrait, but you could never tell. She wears what's called the mask of youth.
The mask of youth was a technique to emphasize her youthful appearance. This form of propaganda intended to show the Queen as immortal and bolster her image as a strong and stable monarch.
So this is Elizabeth I's makeup box.
These are recreations of the types of cosmetics that Elizabeth would have used as part of her war against aging. Are you going to try it?
Let's try it.
Absolutely. So cleansers, you've got several choices. There is a lovely recipe from the period which combines distilled honey with strong vinegar, milk and the urine of a small boy.
Okay.
Maybe give that one a miss.
And the key to Elizabeth I's perfect pale complexion, a powder made from white lead.
It's a very, very white powder on my finger, but when I put it onto my skin, it's actually not clown white.
It's actually pretty magical. It's rather fantastic.
It is. Lead is a metallic pigment, so
perfect white
reflects light.
Uh-huh.
And we still use all sorts of light-reflecting pigments today.
It's horribly toxic, isn't it?
It is.
What was it doing to these women when they used it every day?
It could make your gums recede and your breath stink. It can affect your fertility. It can cause confusion.
You're basically giving yourself lead poisoning.
Absolutely, yes. Sad thing is, they knew it was poisonous. We've known since the Roman period.
It's really comparable to how we use some dodgy substances on our skin today because we still want to look young and beautiful.
Absolutely. And we have been doing so for at least 2,000 years.
Elizabeth I's finishing touch was a dusting of real pearl powder.
We need a little colour in the cheeks and lips to finish up. OK, so we've got a choice between little dried cochineal beetles.
I'm not sure about having beetles on my face.
Okay. How about some vermilion?
Well, that's beautiful. What an amazing colour.
Gorgeous colour. This is red mercuric sulfide.
Oh.
It's mercury.
So it's mercury.
You'd struggle not to lick it off your lips if we put that on you. So out of the two...
I'll have the beetles.
The Elizabethan look is to cover quite a bit of the cheek.
That is quite bright.
It's a different look, isn't it?
Although the more toxic and outright lethal ingredients have been removed, it seems the Tudor Queen's cosmetic routine was not too far removed from the traditions of modern royal makeup.
Was it really worth smearing yourself with urine, lead, lard and crushed beetles?
So these ingredients have got an incredibly long history. Modern-day cosmetics that are known to contain things like synthetic urea, carminic acid, which is the colouring principle in cochineal, refined animal fats. These are all considered perfectly suitable for a modern-day monarch.
Incredible. Makeup is power.
Coming up, when royal traditions go wrong...
The pictures are quite comical, where he's blocking the Queen when they're reviewing troops.
Make a statement.
You can't get rid of the monarchy. It's here to stay.
And turn the stomach.
The recipe is you grind down the skull of someone who suffered a violent death.
For over 200 years, the British royal family has been using the tradition of state visits to project Britain onto the world stage and keep international relations sweet.
It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King.
In February 2025, Donald Trump was given an unprecedented second invitation to visit, this time from King Charles via Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer. It was received with delight at the White House.
The answer is yes, and we look forward to being there and honouring the King.
If you're in any doubt about the political impact of a state visit, just look at the way Donald Trump recently responded to a second invitation to have a state visit.
And that says it Windsor. That's really something.
There's something unquantifiably magical, the alchemy of monarchy, something wondrous, inexplicable, that defies logic. And it speaks to Trump. It's something Trump doesn't have. He's got every bit of bling that money could possibly buy, but he doesn't have the magic of monarchy. But we can bestow that upon him.
The tradition of US presidential visits dates back around a century when, after World War I, America emerged as a new global superpower. The royal traditions swung into action to greet President Woodrow Wilson on the first official US state visit in 1918.
Overseeing the ceremonial importance of this brave new world was our little king, George V. And it was seen as hugely successful. It was a fusion of old and new, royal and democratic, American and British.
And it may have heralded a new tradition of the royals not being in control of the invitations.
The king didn't want to host the American president. He was not consulted about whether he would host the American president. He was livid. He had to forego shooting pheasants at Sandringham to come back to Buckingham Palace.
Unhappy king or not, that inaugural US state visit was the beginning of a very important friendship.
The American president and his wife, Edith, had a very good time and came away with acceptable ideas of Britishness, of British power, of British history, of British decorum and manners. And I think that in some ways you can see that as one of the bedrocks of today's special relationship.
Subsequent visits from American presidents mostly reinforced that special relationship, with a few hiccups.
No, so this room is full of mirrors. Where would you like us to stand?
Sometimes the press have picked up on moments where royal etiquette and a more relaxed approach to etiquette from American presidents have interacted. Often, though, if you look more closely, you'll see the royals trying to smooth that over.
There is a wonderful story about President Jimmy Carter, a very sincere man, meeting the late Queen Mother and kissing her on the lips, and she was really shocked. Nobody had kissed her on the lips since her late husband had died, George VI. So that was perhaps a little over-familiar.
And there is a chance that those presidential faux pas may happen again. President Donald Trump visited in 2019 and upset centuries of tradition by walking ahead of the Queen.
The pictures are quite comical, where he's blocking the Queen when they're reviewing troops. So I don't think he intended any discourtesy, but obviously he always thinks that he's the most important person in the room, whoever he's in the room with.
But a lack of etiquette wasn't the only disruption of tradition that Trump brought with him.
When Trump arrived, the streets were lined mostly with people protesting his visit.
To avoid the anti-Trump protesters, the president defied tradition and made a very unconventional entrance.
Trump being Trump, flies over the protesters, lands in the middle of the Buckingham Palace lawns. All the journalists, including myself, were stationed on the lawn. complete silence, waiting to see this momentous moment. He emerges from the helicopter. He thought he was going to meet the Queen, but it was Charles and Camilla who were the first to meet him.
It's not clear whether the Queen was entirely on board with this very non-traditional mode of transport.
Now, I once spoke to an Air Commodore in the RAF. He said that when he sat at a dinner with the late Queen shortly after Trump's state visit, she hadn't appreciated the way in which his helicopter had disturbed her emerald lawns at Windsor.
But the royal traditions of grinning and bearing it meant the Queen performed a masterclass in diplomacy, one that left Trump in awe of the royal family.
It was incumbent upon the late Queen to make sure that every head of state felt like he or she was her favourite head of state. And if Trump came away able to say with conviction that he was the Queen's favourite head of state or favourite president, then the Queen was doing her job well.
A royal state visit is one of the more flamboyant ways that royals keep their brand prominent on the world stage. But closer to home, they have created a tradition that has kept them at the forefront of our minds for centuries. The royal tradition of commissioning statues is a way of reaching as wide an audience as possible.
Now, this isn't just vanity. This is essential for showing themselves to their people. A statue was particularly helpful because it could be life-sized and it could be crafted according to what the monarch wanted to convey.
That tradition can be traced back to a perfect example of royal PR and the oldest surviving bronze statue of a king in London, Charles I, atop his horse in Trafalgar Square. It was commissioned in 1630. A year after the king had dissolved Parliament after a series of disputes. This tension escalated into the English Civil War in 1642, and it didn't end well for Charles I.
He was convicted of high treason against his people and he was executed. It was the end of the monarchy, so this statue had to be taken down.
Orders were given for the king's statue to be melted down, but the metalsmith hid it away instead. Its time to shine would come 20 years later.
It was brought back in the reign of Charles's son, Charles II, who restored the monarchy. And it was very symbolic because the statue shows Charles decked out in his regal finery, and it's the very image of royal majesty.
It was erected as a piece of royal propaganda. Even if in real life the man on the horse had his head cut off, it's like it's been airbrushed out of the story. That is one of the most effective uses of a statue. It weaponizes the royal family and any ideas of taking down the royal family.
Charles II was sending a message to his people: you can't get rid of the monarchy, it's here to stay.
In more recent years, the tradition of royal statuary may not have achieved such powerful aims. In 2024, a statue of the late Queen and Prince Philip was unveiled at Antrim Castle Gardens in Northern Ireland.
It's been heavily criticised. A lot of people have said that the Queen looks like Robin Williams in Mrs. Doubtfire.
I think it's rather fun, that public art, and sometimes it's a bit of hit or miss, but it's still a kind of expression of love.
The tradition of creating royal statues presented the monarch as immortal and in rude health, and recently the king's health has been the focus of public attention. Fortunately, he has a coterie of royal medical staff, including a personal doctor, physician, surgeon, and apothecary, ensuring he receives the very best modern treatments. Almost 400 years ago, Charles II had a rather weirder approach to medicine.
In the 17th century, the king built, under St James's Palace in Westminster, a secret underground lab, and that was where he engaged in the gruesome practice of skull medicine. Charles II loved chemistry, and when he became king, what he wanted to do was buy skulls and turn them into medicine so he'd never be ill again. The idea was that when you died a horrible death, hanging or something else that would cause fear, all the potency in your organs would rush into your flesh and rush into your bones. That if you ate these bones or ate this flesh, you would have loads of energy and loads of potency. The recipe is you grind down the skull of someone who suffered a violent death. Then you mix it with ground up deer antler and some ivory, mix it all up, and you've got the king's drops. Charles thought that would cure himself and anyone else of all diseases. So imagine fashionable ladies dancing at St James's Palace. Little did they know that under their feet there was a bubbling laboratory of horrors in which Charles was making medicine out of dead bodies.
In 1684, the king's drops would be put to their ultimate test.
Charles becomes increasingly frail. He wakes up feeling very ill, and they immediately give him the king's drops. Lots and lots, 40 drops, 50 drops. It doesn't work. He's dead 4 days later. Bizarrely, the royal family keep pots of the king's drops. It's a bit like when grandma dies and you keep her marmalade as a memory of her. So when Charles II's niece, Mary II, she's on her deathbed, they give her the king's drops. Doesn't work. She dies too. They are completely and utterly useless.
Coming up, the royals blazing a trail with their own traditions in the 21st century. From the sublime,
she very deliberately dressed down, and that included minimal pale makeup, the opposite of your Elizabethan power portrait.
to the questionable.
I was so sad when I saw that. There's nothing in that statue that resembles the beautiful, vivacious woman that I knew.
For centuries, how the royals look has been under constant scrutiny. And traditionally, it's the royal women who bear the brunt of it. Tudor Queen Elizabeth I used elaborate and deadly makeup to show the world her power. Today's royals have created a more understated tradition.
The late Queen had a beautiful complexion, and she didn't wear very much makeup. And actually, the Duke of Edinburgh once, he was talking to someone who said, Her Majesty the Queen, what a lovely, lovely complexion she has. And the Duke said, yes, she does. And do you know, she's like that all over.
The Queen set a high benchmark for the look of modern royals. But like in many elements of royal tradition, the Princess of Wales is blazing her own trail. Her look is understated, but no less powerful than the royals of the past. In 2024, she recorded a video message revealing her cancer diagnosis. And she chose a very natural look.
She very deliberately dressed down, and that included minimal pale makeup. This was the opposite of your Elizabethan power portrait. This was Kate wearing her own physical vulnerability for us all to see. This was Kate sharing her pain, and that, ironically, enhanced her power. She has, I think, in the wake of her cancer hell, become almost untouchable in terms of one of our state players in this country.
And by creating this powerful video, the princess took control of the royal relationship with the media. A relationship that in recent decades has become strained to breaking point. But until the mid-20th century, there was a tradition of unquestioning deference from the press. The royals were seen as a vital pillar of a stable society that we all looked up to.
The idea that our monarch might be behaving in an unbecoming, immoral, irreligious fashion, that was absolutely perceived to be persona non grata. And that's why you get this very decorous press coverage.
But in the 1930s, this arrangement was pushed to its limits by the scandal emerging behind closed doors. King Edward VIII's affair with married American socialite Wallis Simpson. The world's press reported on it with glee, but not so in Britain.
It's all over the French, the Italian, German, American press. But Britain chooses to remain silent because of this gentleman's code that they have with the monarchy, which seems inconceivable to us today.
In October 1936, Wallis divorced her husband, and the King told Prime Minister Stanley Baldwin that he planned to marry her. Baldwin threatened that if the King went ahead with his plan, the government would resign and plunge the country into crisis. But still, the British public were oblivious.
It becomes clear that there's going to be a showdown between the King and the Prime Minister Stanley Baldwin about him wanting to marry a divorced woman. The press does break its silence, but it's months after everyone else has done it.
And the result was, when it finally breaks, a furore is unleashed. And we know that it doesn't last long. He, PDQ, abdicates within a year.
A few hours ago, I discharged my last duty as King and Emperor.
It was heartbreaking and shocking to the British public because they hadn't been drip-fed these stories. It arrives like a sort of tsunami. And there's also an indignation, and rightly so, that how come people overseas know more about our royal family than we know about them?
There is only one statue of Edward VIII in Britain, in stark contrast to the dozens of statues of other monarchs. The tradition of creating royal statues has long been a way of commemorating dead royals. But sometimes the process doesn't go smoothly. In 2017, 20 years after her death sparked national mourning, William and Harry commissioned a statue of Princess Diana to cement her legacy. But creating a fitting tribute to Diana can be tricky to get right.
There are some very, very bad Diana statues out there.
They haven't really captured Princess Diana as I think the family would want her to be captured.
Whether they're made from marble or marzipan, from the sublime to the ridiculous.
There's a whole army of Diana statues in China. And who can forget the incredibly tasteless half-naked one that used to be in Harrods at the bottom of the stairs, barefoot with her and Dodi Fayed, both releasing a bird into who knows what.
Trusted not to add to this list, renowned sculptor Ian Rank Broadley was given the commission at the end of 2017.
Of course, we all know Mr. Broadley's work because his design of the Queen adorned every British coin.
The stakes were high for Mr. Rank Broadley.
The sculptor has to please not only every single one of Princess Diana's billions of fans, but also two royal princes who are very used to having things done their own way.
After a 4-year wait, the much-anticipated statue was finally ready. But in the meantime, the relationship between the two princes had deteriorated drastically.
If you look at 2017, when it was commissioned, William and Harry were best of friends. Fast forward, 4 years later, there is a huge rift between the brothers.
William and Harry's strained relationship was at breaking point. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex had announced their intention to withdraw from the royal family and move to California.
Months before the unveiling of the statue, Harry has come out publicly vilifying the royal family, not just once, but several times.
So the story of the sculpture of Diana got overshadowed by the bigger question of, are the two brothers speaking to each other?
The statue was unveiled to the public on the 1st of July 2021, to mark what would have been Diana's 60th birthday. It was the first time the brothers had been seen together in public for months.
The press and the public were looking for the body language between the two boys. Have they mended the rift? Diana's two sons pulled the sheet off of the statue. This mother is looking onto her two sons, and all of us looking at that, knowing that they're barely speaking.
The statue was reportedly inspired by a 1993 Christmas card featuring Diana and her sons.
So you'll see, if you look at that Christmas card, she's wearing that exact outfit, the same belt, the same shirt, the same pencil skirt, and she's got her two boys next to her.
Cast in bronze, a traditional material for royal statues, it stands at 1¼ times life size. But it divided the critics.
I was so sad when I saw that. I mean, I knew Diana, and there's nothing in that statue that resembles the beautiful, vivacious, funny, stunningly handsome woman that I knew. It just doesn't work for me at all.
But not everyone disliked the statue.
Enjoy! Thank you. Thank you. I think the public really like it, and I think they get it. This wasn't a statue of a mother and her two sons. It was a woman who'd helped a lot of people, particularly children, in her charitable work. It's not meant to be overly complicated.
Unfortunately, the unveiling of the statue didn't bring the brothers back together.
Don't think that Prince Harry spoke to William at all, turned up for the unveiling 20 minutes before, pulls the rug off the statue and left 20 minutes later. So it was very sad to see that relationship had not been fixed at all and wasn't fixed during that event.
Coming up, the royal tradition of putting your foot in it.
He said, "Oh, you look as if you're ready for bed." I'm not sure that really was the right thing to say.
And how the tradition of respect between the royals and the press changed completely.
There are many invasions of their privacy, and it reaches its nadir when Diana, Princess of Wales, is quite literally chased to her death.
Traditionally, the royal family have played a central role in maintaining foreign relations, whether on state visits at home or abroad. And Queen Elizabeth II made it seem effortless.
The late Queen was the ultimate diplomat. I mean, she was more experienced as a head of state than any other head of state alive, and she knew so many of them, both past and present. So she had this wealth of experience and knowledge.
Her husband, Prince Philip, however, created his own tradition when dealing in foreign affairs. Putting his foot in it.
The Duke of Edinburgh sometimes did cause a few diplomatic ruffles of the feathers, I suppose.
You don't sound entirely native.
But I remember there was an occasion when he was in Nigeria. He saw the president, who was in his traditional robe, and he said, "Oh, you look as if you're ready for bed." I'm not sure that really was the right thing to say.
Prince Philip's job, I think, was meant to be a clown or a warm-up man for the serious act, which was his wife, really, but not appropriate.
But it seems Prince Philip wasn't the first royal to cause offence. He may have been following a centuries-old tradition of diplomacy going out of the window.
James VI of Scotland, when he became James I of England on the death of Elizabeth I in 1603, even by the low standards of 17th century hygiene, was reputed to be rather a grubby king. James apparently had an aversion to water, never washed, didn't wash his hands before eating, never changed his clothes, and even his lover wrote that I kiss your dirty hands.
James I's personal hygiene may have left a lot to be desired, but when it came to entertaining a foreign head of state, it could be a riot.
One night in particular at Theobald's Palace, a night to commemorate the visit of King Christian IV of Denmark. You'd think this would be so dignified, so strict. Instead, it was apparently an orgy of drunkenness.
It's about as far away as you can get from a modern state banquet, but it was a success for international relations.
Both kings were heavy drinkers, and the evening's entertainment would be a performance of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. But unfortunately, when it began, everyone was completely drunk. The actor playing the Queen's part fell over and dropped an entire tray of cream and jelly and cakes all over King Christian. King Christian Christian said, "I'm fine," and got up to dance and then fell splat on his face and had to be carried to bed, completely drunk, senseless, and covered in cream and jelly.
For centuries, there was a tradition that the press would not report on scandalous behaviour like that of James I. But by the 1980s, everything had changed.
Previously, the quality papers and the mass newspapers had been quite deferential in their coverage. In the 1980s, the monarchy became tabloid fodder, and perfect fodder for them was the disintegrating marriages of the Queen's children, and all sorts of stories appeared.
The gloves were now off, and while dozens of news stories are published about the royal family each year, sometimes the royals use the press to send a message.
There aren't many photos that you can say are genuinely iconic, but I think you can say that about this photo.
The now iconic picture of Diana at the Taj Mahal was snapped by then royal photographer for the Daily Mirror, Kent Gavin.
I would think I've taken over maybe 2 million frames of the royal family over the years.
This was not the first time a royal had been photographed in exactly the same spot at the Taj Mahal. 12 years earlier, as Charles and Diana's relationship was starting to gather pace, the Prince of Wales visited India and Kent took an almost identical image.
In 1980, I was sent to cover the Prince of Wales trip to India. It was a year before the wedding. He agreed to visit the Taj Mahal. And during that trip, he said, "Do you know, the Taj was built from a man that loved a woman so much. One day, I'm going to bring my wife back here to visit this monument."
The opportunity arose in 1992, when the now married couple visited India. But instead of bringing his wife to the Taj Mahal, he met with business leaders. Diana sat isolated on a bench in front of the monument.
Charles did not fulfill his promise because Diana came alone.
The world press captured the iconic image. It told the story of a marriage that was falling apart.
It's the framing of the photograph in so many ways which makes her look so small and vulnerable.
If you look at all the pictures, she never smiles. God knows what was going through her mind. I genuinely think that she was extremely upset about it.
Diana understood the power of the image she created.
I think many people suspected that Diana was unhappy, but that photograph did feel like a message that she was sending the world. It just became such a totemic image of Diana's unhappiness.
The picture hit the headlines, and the press criticised Charles for abandoning Diana, cementing the idea that their marriage had already run its course. The relationship between royals and press soured even further, culminating in one of the most shocking events in royal history.
The criticism moves into an obsessive, intrusive interest in them. There do start to be articles that are wildly speculative. There are many invasions of their privacy, and it reaches its nadir in 1997 when Diana, Princess of Wales, is quite literally chased to her death by people in search of a photograph of her.
Despite this tragedy, stories continued to be published about the royals' private lives. And in 2006, a story in the News of the World broke a scandal wide open.
It related how Prince William had left a message for Harry in which he, William, had pretended to be Harry's then girlfriend, Chelsea Davy, reprimanding him for visiting a lap dancing club. All very jolly and joshing and all the rest of it, and very amusing in its way. But the fact that the News of the World quoted his actual words and his message really did set alarm bells ringing.
The police had all the evidence they needed, and in August 2006, journalists were arrested and charged with intercepting private phone messages involving the royal family. By now, the issue went far beyond the princes and their royal aides.
It turned out that phone hacking of celebrities, politicians, policemen, soldiers, victims of crime was going on an industrial scale.
Within a few years, more journalists from other newspapers were prosecuted for conspiracy to intercept communications without lawful authority. Some received jail sentences.
Fast forward to 2013, and a whole host of others from the News International titles were in court at the Old Bailey. William's phone had been hacked, Harry's phone had been hacked, Kate Middleton's phone had been hacked. We now know that William used to call Kate Babykins because of the evidence that was presented in the Old Bailey. And the only reason that Charles and the Queen hadn't been hacked was because they don't have mobile phones. So that was the only reason.
Princes William and Harry, as well as hundreds of other victims, reached out-of-court settlements with the newspaper publishers, as well as damages. It's a stark reminder that from world stage and public statues to their most personal moments, the royals have to fight to preserve their traditions. And in an ever-changing world, the great public traditions, like the state visit, matter more than ever. Next time, the mystical traditions at the heart of the king's coronation.
Older than England, older than Christianity, back to the Bronze Age.
How the royals dealt with the traditional tensions of taking the press pack on tour.
Prince Philip hated the press. He called them reptiles.
And how centuries of tradition gifted the royals vast swathes of Britain and the right to eat some of its wildlife.
None of them have recently availed themselves of the opportunity, so the swan population continues unharmed.
For the royals, tradition is everything.
Tradition is the raison d'etre of the royal family, the human embodiment of Britishness.
Spectacular.
The thundering of the hooves and the banging of the drums. I defy anyone not to get thrilled by that.
Sacred.
It's almost as though the king is invested with superpowers.
And very British.
Victoria's funeral was a reminder that we were still the dogs whatnots at this game.
Now we reveal the secrets of those traditions, from banquets to christenings to coronations.
You may think it's pantomime, but no, the uniforms were handed down from servant to servant.
And how some traditions can go wrong.
With Elizabeth I, her body actually exploded in its coffin.
It's a rich royal heritage that's been forged through duty to the nation.
The British monarchy is always at the service of the British state.
No matter what the task.
The duty of the royals is to go and open every damn thing that's around, from a supermarket to sewage works.
The Queen loved it. Prince Philip hated it.
As for over 1,000 years, the royals have shaped the history and the traditions we know today.
They're sending out a message. This is an ancient institution and it's here to stay.
These are the secrets of royal traditions, then and now. This time, the most traditional of royal traditions, the coronation.
Older than England, older than Christianity, back to the Bronze Age.
The traditional tensions of taking the press pack on royal tour.
Prince Philip hated the press. He called them reptiles.
And how centuries of tradition gifted the royals vast swathes of Britain and the right to eat some of its wildlife.
None of them have recently availed themselves of the opportunity, so the swan population continues unharmed.
On the 6th of May, 2023, following the death of his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, King Charles III was crowned at Westminster Abbey.
The pomp, the pageantry, the detail. No one does it like we do it.
But for even the most seasoned royal watcher, many of the traditions on display were mystifying.
It did at times seem almost like a pantomime because it was so so very strange in so many ways. I think the weirdest one for me was the white glove. It looked to me as if he was perhaps going to go and do a little gardening at Highgrove or something.
The single glove may look like it belongs to a Michael Jackson tribute act, but it's actually a symbol of the monarch's commitment to ruling with a fair hand. First used at Richard II's coronation in 1377. And incredibly, the glove is a new addition compared to some of the coronation's other traditions.
It's astonishing how many of the elements actually date back not hundreds but thousands of years.
The coronation ceremony has followed the same template, with a few tweaks, for over 1,000 years.
The blueprint for today's coronations was set in the year 973 by King Edgar. He introduced really the form of coronation ceremony that's still used today.
It was Edward I who introduced the ceremony's focal point, used at every coronation in Westminster Abbey since 1308.
Every British monarch who's been crowned was crowned sitting on that coronation chair.
This roll call of past occupants gives the coronation chair its power. By sitting in it, the new ruler inherits that power.
It's about heredity, and it's about handing things down. It's about doing things that we can associate with the past, even if they're updated for a modern age.
Nowhere is the bond between past and present stronger than in the coronation's central ritual. A ritual so sacred, we're forbidden from even seeing it.
What we didn't see on the day, because there was a screen and it's never seen, was the monarch who had kind of stripped to simple clothing, invested on his head and his chest and his hands with anointing oil. So like this and like this and like this, so perhaps with the sign of the cross.
The secrecy dates back centuries and stems from the belief that this sacred moment is for the monarch and God alone. But the tradition itself is far older even than the royal family.
Older than England, older than Christianity, tracking you way back to the Bronze Age because of the anointing, as King Solomon was anointed, as king of the Israelites.
This ancient ritual's purpose is to present the king as the successor in a long line of rulers, stretching back over 3,000 years to the Old Testament kings Solomon, Saul, and David. Kings who were believed to be appointed by God.
The anointing symbolizes the moment when a monarch really becomes almost divine. They are given powers by God.
In times past, having God on your side was a good way to deter any rivals for the throne. Even in modern times, anointing has remained a tradition with deep spiritual significance, particularly for the late Queen.
She said, I felt the presence of God. That's quite chilling when the monarch tells you that. I would think King Charles III felt the same thing. It's a very solemn moment.
The finishing touch is, of course, the crown. And it's another tradition as old as time.
Crowning is a little bit like marriage in that it's so ancient that we have no real idea when it originated. Ancient monarchs are crowned. You see it in something like the Narmer palette of the early pharaohs, which is 5,000 years ago. Coronations change and shift over the centuries, but what goes on the head of the monarch seems to be a recurring theme throughout them.
In the case of the British crown, this tradition weighs heavily on its wearer.
St. Edward's crown is so immensely heavy, the late Queen said if you bent forward you would break your neck.
There was a lot of tension over placing St. Edward's crown, which is really heavy, on the king's head, and the Archbishop had to be very careful to get it the right way round, because in the past, there was definitely one occasion when the Archbishop put it on backwards.
But even when everything goes according to plan, all this tradition can take its toll.
And it all seemed to me a bit of an ordeal for the principals. I can't say that I thought that either Charles or Camilla looked relaxed at any point, and I really felt rather sorry for them.
But maybe not too sorry, because with the crown came a vast fortune, thanks to the royal tradition of being exempt from tax.
There's no doubt that the head of state is wealthy, and that's partly because there's no death duties paid, and there's no income tax paid on the income that comes in pursuit of their duties.
When the late Queen died, King Charles inherited vast estates in Scotland and England. His mother's personal wealth of at least £370 million, and the Duchy of Lancaster, worth around £652 million.
So that probably has meant the accumulation of a large amount of personal wealth, which is probably at least £500 million.
On top of this windfall, the king inherited 25% of the annual profits from the vast Crown estate, which is worth at least £15 billion. And with that comes a host of highly lucrative and occasionally unusual items, ranging from London's Regent Street to the seabed surrounding the UK coastline. And yes, the king really does own the nation's wild mute swans. According to medieval law, for centuries the monarch was technically the only person in Britain with the right to eat one.
None of them have recently availed themselves of the opportunity, so the swan population continues unharmed.
This enormous wealth originated in the Middle Ages, when the royal family began accumulating power by acquiring land. This royal property portfolio ballooned in the 16th century, thanks to Henry VIII.
When Henry in the 1530s made himself head of the church, then all the church wealth, the wealth of the monasteries, church lands, were all diverted to the crown. And that was really the beginnings of the enormous wealth that the crown has enjoyed throughout 500 years or more.
Coming up, the great royal tradition of spending all that wealth by building extensions.
Henry wants to live in a new way. He wants more sumptuousness, and nothing is going to stand in his way.
The extravagant traditions of royal childhood.
PlayStations, plasma screen TVs, games. William and Harry could have anything they wanted.
And the traditional hijinks of the press pack on tour with the royals.
And then we all got in a jacuzzi outside under the stars, and Charles's press secretary got in with us.
The Royal Overseas Tour is a familiar and much-loved tradition.
Squeals of delight greeted Charles and Diana.
And an integral part of that tradition is the Royal Press Pack.
I very much enjoyed the state visits, which were historic in nature. Going to India with Charles and Diana in 1992 and seeing her sit at the Taj Mahal, the Monument to Beauty. Going to Russia on a state visit, and the security in Red Square being so intense that they swept the whole place of every Russian. And the Duke of Edinburgh walking up and down lines of tourists from Manchester and all over the place. There's not a bloody Russian anywhere to be found. You know? Many, many wonderful occasions.
Taking the press pack on tour is a relatively new royal tradition.
I want to tell you all how happy I am to be amongst you and how much I look forward to my journey through Australia.
One of the first tours selected members of the press were invited to join was the late Queen's 1953 trip to Australia and New Zealand.
It will surely be on Bondi Beach, that natural glory of Sydney, that the Queen and Duke will retain some of their most pleasant memories of the tour.
With the coming of photography, and particularly television, the royal family had woken up to the media's potential to promote them and the nation to a global audience.
Elizabeth II once said, "I have to be seen in order to be believed." The photographer's lens is the way in which millions, later billions of people see the royal family.
The press pack has become a traditional fixture on royal overseas trips, but not always a popular one.
Prince Philip hated the press. He hated them. He called them reptiles. He called them names that I could not possibly repeat.
So a royal tour is no holiday for the royals or the press pack, particularly when things go south.
I do regret one thing from the Caribbean tour I covered, which was drinking, for some inexplicable reason, river water from a South American river. I don't know, I was rather carried away. And then for most of the rest of the tour, I did have terrible diarrhea. And it's quite hard when you're like traveling in convoy up country or filing from some strange place and you're like desperately on the anti-diarrhea pills.
Avoiding the local water is a good excuse for the press pack's own tradition of partying.
We let loose a bit, we reporters, and we had a karaoke night, and big burly cameraman wearing his producer's silk dress did a somersault and split the dress, and then we all got in a jacuzzi outside under the stars, and Charles's press secretary got in with us actually as well. We made a lot of noise, we had a lovely time. Charles came down in the morning and he said, "What's that you lot think? That bloody awful noise. Honestly, I couldn't sleep a wink." So we had a lot of fun.
Despite their royal duties, fun is something the royal family takes seriously. And it's a tradition that begins in childhood, with the giving of elaborate and sometimes excessive gifts.
William and Harry could have anything they wanted. PlayStations, plasma screen TVs, games, anything really the boys wanted.
In the past, toys were traditionally gifted to royal children to curry favour with the monarch. Prince Andrew received a miniature James Bond-style Aston Martin DB5, complete with toy machine guns and a working smokescreen, while his older siblings bagged a pint-sized caravan, which can't have been easy to wrap. Today, the tradition of unusual and extravagant royal toys is one the royal family seems keen to minimise.
In William and Kate's world, their children won't be spoiled. I think things in moderation. Kate's very sensible that way.
They like quite traditional pursuits, like having a barbecue in the gardens, riding around on their bicycles, playing on tractors. I think part of William and Catherine's absolute ethos in life is to make their family as normal as is possible. That's never going to be normal, is it? But that's why they live in a relatively small house without live-in staff.
William and Kate's restrained approach represents a major break with royal tradition because their predecessors had much more extravagant tastes. In fact, they made a tradition out of flaunting their wealth and power by spending vast sums of money upgrading their royal palaces. And the biggest and most excessive royal renovator of them all was Henry VIII.
Hampton Court is the greatest surviving example of Henry VIII's work. This sprawling red brick complex represents an investment of about £62,000 in his money, tens of millions today.
And Henry's building at Hampton Court, like everything he did, was taken to extremes of scale.
Hampton Court is the Tudor palace par excellence. It doesn't come much better than this. It's visually stunning. It really is a palace built by a Renaissance man, and it just shouts power and richness.
Henry VIII is renowned as one of the great royal palace builders. He acquired, new built, developed, extended residences across the country. When he came to the throne in 1509, he inherited about 20 properties from his father, Henry VII. When he died 38 years later, he'd amassed close to 70 properties.
This palace-building frenzy was kick-started by his famous midlife crisis.
By the time we hit 1528, 1529, he's been married to Catherine of Aragon for 20 years. And they only have one child to show for it, a girl, Princess Mary. So he's facing this real dilemma in terms of his legacy.
He wants to get rid of his long-standing wife, Catherine of Aragon. He wants a new wife, Anne Boleyn. He wants to live in a new way. He wants more sumptuousness, and nothing is going to stand in his way.
Henry wasn't the first English king hell-bent on flexing his power and flaunting his wealth. 300 years earlier, his namesake Henry III flashed the cash by transforming his properties, including the Tower of London. But Henry VIII turned this tradition into an obsession.
He gets the building bug big time, and he's getting directly involved in the process. He's poring over the plans, he's directing people, he's deciding the grand way that he wants to live from now on.
Henry seized Hampton Court from his former advisor, Cardinal Wolsey, seeing it as the perfect royal doer-upper.
Henry VIII's builders took over Hampton Court and embarked on a programme of massive expansion that would last for over a decade. There was the practical stuff to consider: new offices, lodgings for the royal courtiers, but also beautiful new privy gardens and suites of accommodation for not only Henry VIII, but also his mistress, Anne Boleyn, who was not yet queen. There's no lodgings, though, for the old queen, Catherine of Aragon. This was all about Henry's future.
Henry's future would include a vast entourage, and all needed accommodation at Hampton Court.
This might include members of his family, senior nobles, certainly his privy council, servants and pages and knights and yeomen, and that everyone required to support all of that.
Henry's huge household was a projection of his power, and they would come together daily in one all-important room.
This fabulous space, the Great Hall, was at the heart of Henry VIII's building works. We know from records that in summer 1535, there were 70 stonemasons and 81 bricklayers. There were 45 carpenters and 21 joiners, plus 208 labourers, all working away to complete this grand vision at the heart of the palace.
At Hampton Court, Henry VIII took the tradition of royal renovations to an extreme, transforming every inch of his vast palace. No surface, no corner was left untouched.
I'm heading for one of the most unexpectedly spectacular and costly parts of the palace. I'm not talking about rooms full of tapestries. I'm talking about the roof.
Here, where few ventured, Henry turned the functional into the fantastic.
Each one of these chimneys is different to the next. There are 241 of them, and they excel in their quality and variety. Now, it must be said, not a single one remains intact from Henry VIII's period, but they have been faithfully duplicated with bricks cleverly made into molds so that you can create these geometric designs. One like a net, another one with zigzags, another like a set of knotted ropes. They have all the festival atmosphere of a maypole. They don't have to be like that, but this is expenditure. It's showing off for its own sake.
Coming up, ancient royal traditions on parade.
The thundering of the hooves and the banging of the drums. I defy anyone not to get thrilled by that.
The great tradition of banishing unpopular royals.
Andrew couldn't be on the balcony and couldn't embarrass the royals. Harry and Meghan couldn't be on the balcony.
And the royal rituals of playboy princes.
He was a gambler, he was a bit of a drinker, and he was constantly at it. He had a voracious appetite for women.
Britain's royal traditions have been carefully crafted to capture the public imagination. And few are more captivating than the trooping of the colour.
The soldiers are coming in on their horses and their breastplates gleaming, and there's the thundering of the hooves and the banging of the drums. I defy anyone not to get thrilled by that.
Every year, on the King's official birthday, Horse Guards Parade in London plays host to a grand military parade of around 1,400 soldiers, 200 horses, and 400 musicians. It's a colourful and spectacular celebration. But its roots lie in the chaos and horror of war.
Trooping of the Colour harkens back to a time when kings led their soldiers into battle. The colours they refer to are the regimental banners, and they played a huge role in keeping soldiers as safe and alive as is possible in an early modern or medieval battle.
On the battlefield, it could get very confusing, and it was very important for every single soldier to know who he was fighting, who was on his side. And so each army would have their own colours, and the flags would display that colour. And so regularly, during manoeuvres, during battles, the regiment's flag would be marched up and down so that every single soldier knew which side he was on.
After the parade, the royal family traditionally view the procession up the Mall from the Buckingham Palace balcony. For some royal watchers, this tradition is an indication of who's in favour with the monarch and who's out. In 2022, after a bombshell interview with US television the previous year, speculation mounted as to whether Harry and Meghan would be welcomed on the balcony or banished to peer out of a window.
I think the Queen came up with a pretty elegant solution to who got to watch Trooping the Colour from where. Only working royals got to be on the Buckingham Palace balcony. That killed two birds with one stone, if you like. It meant that Andrew couldn't be on the balcony and couldn't embarrass the royals, and it meant that Harry and Meghan couldn't be on the balcony.
So Harry and Meghan watched the Trooping of the Colour from the Major General's office. And those were the first shots, actually, that we had of Harry and Meghan in the UK for a long time.
The following day, suspicions that the Sussexes were being sidelined seemed to be confirmed at the traditional birthday Thanksgiving service.
If Harry and William and Kate and Meghan really had made up, this would have been the perfect opportunity to show that. Perhaps they could have arrived together, perhaps they could have been smiling together, perhaps they could have sat near each other.
They sat on the second row, Prince William and Kate sat in the front row on the other side of the church, and there was no eye contact or conversation between them whatsoever.
The current royal family aren't the first royals to have fallen out. In fact, you could say family tension is something of a royal tradition. In 1862, it was friction between Queen Victoria and her wayward son Edward that prompted him to join the long tradition of royal renovators, when he set out to turn sleepy Sandringham House into a Playboy party pad. Set in 20,000 acres of Norfolk countryside, this mini-kingdom has been the private home of 4 generations of British monarchs.
I think Sandringham occupies a unique position among the royal residences, and each succeeding generation of royals has loved it.
Sandringham is about the private person. It's about the family life behind the image of the throne.
In 1862, Queen Victoria acquired the Sandringham estate for her somewhat rogue son and heir, Edward.
Edward was notorious. As much as his parents were sort of chintzy and conservative and domestic and dull, Edward was revolting, libidinous. He was a gambler, he was a bit of a drinker, and he was constantly at it. He had a voracious appetite for women.
Marlborough House, Edward's London home, was notorious. His parents were determined that Sandringham would be a sobering retreat where he could grow into the role of king.
Get him back on track, stick him in an off-path, off-beat estate, and see if we can't improve his behaviour somewhat.
In keeping with royal tradition, Edward threw himself into the project, demolishing the original Georgian house to make way for a fashionable new house.
Sandringham was a style which some people call Jacobean. It's a generic 16th into 17th century revival. It talks about an age of historical confidence. It's youthful, it's a bit extravagant, but by no means too extravagant.
The new Sandringham looked sensible on the outside, but inside, contrary to his parents' hopes, it was a palatial party house.
You wonder what the architect's brief was for Sandringham. If you have a checklist for the racy young monarch-to-be of the 1860s and 70s, you might want a bowling alley or billiard tables. But you've got to have the space to entertain people and to get engaged in country pursuits. And if you are a Prince of Wales, you've got to do it in style.
Edward also made the most of Sandringham's vast estate, turning it into a shooting paradise, complete with Europe's largest game larder.
It was less in many respects about the house and more about the grounds, this kind of playboy park, for want of a better expression, which is where a lot of Edward's attention went. They planted thickets and they imported literally bags of partridges and pheasants and rabbits to get this started, to make this the very best shoot in England. And that really, really mattered at the time.
Over time, Queen Victoria finally got her way, as Edward and Sandringham settled into respectable middle age.
The thing about Sandringham is that, like its inhabitants, it grew up. It went from being a place of billiards and bowling to more cultured pursuits as Edward VII and Queen Alexandra and their children all evolved and grew up. And so the old bowling alley became the Long Library, and that's where the Queen is shown when she gave her first televised address to the nation. So it's not a fixed thing. It shows a life lived.
Today, Sandringham is estimated to be worth as much as £200 million. But royal tradition meant that when King Charles inherited the house and estate in 2023, he didn't pay a penny of tax.
The monarch has been enabled since Queen Victoria's time to acquire a lot of personal wealth because there's no death duties from monarch to monarch.
But this tradition doesn't extend to the rest of the family, who aren't quite as minted as you might imagine.
I think it's a mistake to think that all members of the royal family are immensely wealthy. If you're a subsidiary member of the royal family, most of your income actually comes from offsetting public duties. It's kind of pay for the duties. So they're kind of dependent on handouts.
Can you imagine how sore that makes you feel if you are a Harry or a Margaret?
But the consequences of this tradition extend beyond tensions between siblings. As Princess Margaret's children, David and Sarah, discovered when she died in 2002, and left them with a £3 million tax bill.
When you and I have to pay inheritance tax on an estate, the normal thing to do is to sell the house. But Margaret didn't have a house. She lived in Kensington Palace. It's owned by the country.
With no property to sell, Margaret's children had to think fast.
How do we pay off this £3 million inheritance tax bill? We're going to have to sell some of our mother's possessions.
And so began the royal Bling and Buy sale, with more than 800 items up for grabs.
This is an unprecedented sale of a lifetime. Royal possessions being auctioned off.
It's the equivalent of setting up a car boot sale on the forecourt of Buckingham Palace.
As car boot sales go, this one was pretty upmarket. Jewellery expert Helen Molesworth was put in charge of the sale.
It was an incredible opportunity. This was a once-in-a-lifetime experience. And I'll never forget it.
Helen was responsible for the sale of the most astonishing collection. Rings, brooches, bracelets, each one steeped in royal tradition.
In some instances, we were opening boxes to find the jewels with handwritten notes from members of the family inside. There was a tiny little bee brooch accompanied by a note in Princess Margaret's writing that said, "One of the first pieces of jewellery ever given to Mum." I mean, This is a secret that needed exploring. It was a christening gift to the Queen Mother when she was 7 weeks old.
But the centerpiece of the collection was the Poltimore tiara.
It's one of the most spectacular tiaras in the world anyway. It was made in the 19th century by Garrard.
The auction was a unique chance to own a piece of royal tradition.
24,000 in the West Room.
The room was packed full of people. It was pre-internet days, so people were physically there or on the telephone with us.
And 50, 700.
I think we knew from the beginning it was going to take off.
All the rooms.
Lot 1 was Princess Margaret's ruby and pearl necklace, and that was estimated to fetch £1,200.
Fair warning for all the room. Vorsi also. And 23,000 down there.
It sold for well over £23,000.
Sold to you.
That's how the rest of the auction went. Completely bonkers.
Do I hear £13,000 for an album of lunch menu cards?
30,000.
It seems I do.
Every item sold for way above its estimate. The difference was that some sold for 5 times the estimate and some sold for 150 times the estimate.
The auction moved inexorably towards its climax.
We made sure that we ended with the Poltimore tiara. I'm not going to start with the top lot in the sale.
Estimated at between £150,000 and £200,000, the Poltimore tiara sold for nearly £1 million. The auction had paid off the family's £3 million tax bill, and then some.
At the end of the day, when the final hammer went down, we're looking at £14 million. It's not just the value on what the items were themselves, the jewels, the paintings. It's knowing that they were once part of Princess Margaret's collection.
Buying the princess's jewels meant buying into centuries of royal tradition.
That's what you're buying into, and there's no price tag on that.
Coming up, the great royal tradition of strange rituals.
It's members of the royal family dressing up in the most ridiculous costumes, with hats, with feathers.
And the tradition of receiving extraordinary and extravagant toys.
It is the most ostentatious playhouse you'll ever see.
Royal traditions, shaped by strict protocol and steeped in centuries-old symbolism, can be dazzling, but also puzzling. Perhaps the most perplexing royal tradition is the secretive Brotherhood of Knights, who gather once a year behind closed doors at Windsor Castle. The most noble order of the Garter was founded in 1348 by King Edward III.
The Order of the Garter is the highest order of chivalry in England, and in fact it's the oldest order anywhere in the world that's been in continuous existence.
It's a group of 24 people who are fiercely loyal and swear to protect the king and country.
The traditions of this ancient order have been passed down through the generations. Every year on the traditional Garter Day, the monarch, knights and ladies process through Windsor Castle to St. George's Chapel to attend a special, secret service.
It's members of the royal family dressing up in the most ridiculous costumes, with hats, with feathers, processing down to Windsor Castle. It is a picture opportunity for the wives mainly, like Camilla and Kate, to laugh at their husbands.
Today, the knights' costumes might raise a smile, but their symbolism is steeped in centuries-old tradition. According to legend, when a lady accidentally dropped her garter at a dance, to save her embarrassment, chivalrous Edward III tied it around his own leg, declaring, "Shame on him who thinks evil of it." The garter and that motto, in Latin, became the order's symbol. But over the centuries, quite what the order is supposed to do has become shrouded in mystery.
I don't think we really, as a nation, have much idea of what it's all about. For me, the Order of the Garter, I don't know quite why, always stirs up memories of the Da Vinci Code and Dan Brown, secret sect.
The Order's earliest records were destroyed by fire. But it seems to have been a kind of medieval cosplay club in which the royals and their pals could act out their fantasies of King Arthur and his knights of the Round Table. The club's spiritual home is Windsor Castle, where St. George's Chapel houses each knight's helmet, sword and banner.
These are the flags of the knights and ladies of the Order of the Garter. Now, when a new knight or lady gets invested, they get given their own heraldic flag. The flags are 5 foot square, they are all handmade and meticulously hand-painted, and they're full of personal symbols that relate specifically to the history and life of the person who's just been brought into the Order.
These members are selected by the monarch from a variety of backgrounds in recognition of their public service.
Mary Peters, for instance, who won the pentathlon in the 1972 Olympics, has the Olympic rings in the centre of her flag. John Major has a portcullis, the symbol of the Houses of Parliament, and on top of that are 3 cricket balls to reflect his passion for the game.
The 24 loyal knights and ladies are joined in the Order by another very select group.
Some members of the royal family act as extra members, and the Queen Mother was one of those.
The royal standard of Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, combines the royal standard of her husband, King George VI, with her own family coat of arms, the Bowes Lions. So she has lions represented, but also 3 bows.
According to tradition, the Queen Mother's standard hung in St. George's Chapel for 66 years. Upon her death, it was taken down to make way for a new member. The then Prince Charles, who was particularly close to his grandmother, couldn't bear to be parted from it.
Anyone who goes to Clarence House, one of the first things that they will see as they come in through the front door is the banner hanging there.
Every time he saw it, it would act as a reminder of his beloved grandmother.
For the royals, passing much-loved mementos down through the generations is a firm family tradition. Tucked away in the grounds of Windsor Castle is one of the family's most charming hand-me-downs, and the ultimate example of the long tradition of extraordinary royal playthings. The Welsh Cottage, as it's called, was built in 1932 for the late Queen Elizabeth.
The Welsh Cottage is the most ostentatious playhouse you'll ever see. It's 22 feet wide by 15 feet tall and built as a proper functioning house with a living room and kitchen and bedroom and bathroom, as well as a Frezolux gas-powered refrigerator, a gas cooker, all the mod cons you'd expect of 1932, even a heated towel rail.
We've got a wonderful first-hand account of what this giant Wendy house was like, courtesy of Elizabeth's governess, Marion Crawford. She tells us that when she arrived to look after Elizabeth, the first thing the princess showed her was this little Welsh house. It was her favourite toy. And there's wonderful pictures of the girls playing house in a way that arguably they never really got to do, even when they had their own houses and palaces later in life.
The cottage was a surprise present for the then Princess Elizabeth's 6th birthday. It was built 130 miles away in South Wales, then in the grip of poverty.
This was the era of the Great Depression, and Welsh industry had suffered. So the cottage was a showcase of Welsh artisanal talent before it came to the secretive garden in the middle of Windsor Great Park for the princess to enjoy.
Before we part and go back to our homes in Wales, we should give 3 cheers for the little Princess Elizabeth.
And it's been here now for almost 100 years.
Today, Windsor's hidden Wendy house is playing home to another generation of royals, with George, Charlotte and Louis living just down the road. It's another example of how Britain's royal traditions are passed down through the generations. From treasured family mementos, to grand public spectacles, secret societies, to ancient rituals. Together, these traditions play a crucial role in presenting Britain on the global stage.
People don't tend to come to Britain for the weather. They come for the history and the traditions that we see enacted at great royal events such as coronations, royal weddings. People like to think that they're part of something that's been going for hundreds, if not thousands of years.
Next time, the traditions that make a state banquet the meal of a lifetime.
A state banquet is all about magnificence. There's a lot of showing off, of wealth, of ceremony, of pomp.
How royal school days have changed beyond all recognition.
Prior to the reign of Elizabeth II, royal children were almost invariably taught at home by private tutors. They did not go to schools.
And the age-old royal tradition of taking a mistress, or two, or three.
Edward VII was very well known as an extremely randy Prince of Wales.